Allison.
Okay. We're going to call this meeting to order here, 7 o'clock. And we're going to start off with roll call. Usually go with
Monica Allers.
Ty Bailey.
Bruce Shoemaker.
Scott Jensen.
Bill Blank.
Carlo Bernwald.
Okay. And so next is approval of minutes. Did anybody have any other comments? The minutes as Liz has handed out to us tonight.
No,
Just reviewing
you
your.
did all the talking.
Yeah. Then I would entertain a motion.
Make a motion that we go ahead and approve the minutes as amended. I second. Approve the minutes.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? All right, with no further discussion, I'll call the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? All right, got that done. Next up is citizen input. This is citizen input for anything that is not on the agenda tonight. Is there anybody that wants to speak on anything not on the agenda tonight? Come on up. Please state your name and your city, and you got it. Enunciate into the mic.
Learn quick. My name's Peggy Tate. I'm,
There you go.
my name is Peggy Tate. Anyhow, I've noticed a whole lot around Scappoose, and I don't mean this is wrong, but the guys who are doing the leaves, the yard, they're blowing them into the daggone where the wastewater goes that we pay for on our water bills. They're blowing their leaves in there. Will that not clog, or does that not clog up?
Chris, is this you?
Are you referring to the catch basins or blowing them into?
Where we
The
storm
runoff?
water drains.
That would be a catch basin. Yeah, that would not be good.
Okay, well, they're doing it, so maybe
Where is this occurring?
down by Fred Meyer's, that one that it's on guys. They're blowing.
Oh,
the
so it's
sides,
the commercial
they're
landscape.
blowing them into there, because I guess that way they don't.
This is around Havlick and
And just different places around here. I've seen it several times.
okay. Well, thanks for letting us know. I'll let our public works guys know, and then they can, it's hard to enforcement on that kind of thing because they aren't out to see it, but they can certainly go and backer out those basins. Let them know. Thank you.
Thank you. Bring
Thank
them
you.
back.
Can you make sure
Thank
to
you.
almost eat the mic? You were very quiet.
Oh,
I need to give you the instructions too, Chris. All right, any other public comment not on items on the agenda? All right, seeing none, we're going to move on to new business, continuation after the record was left open for 10 days. This is continuation of docket SB 1-22, ZC 1-22, CU 1-22, SLDP 1-22, 2-22, 3-22, 4-22. David Weekly Homes has requested approval of a tentative subdivision plat approval, SB 1-22, to subdivide Columbia County Assessor Map number 3212, CB 00401 into 48 single-family residential lots in the low-density residential R1 zone. The applicant also requests approval for a planned development overlay zone change, ZC 1-22, conditional use permit, since planned developments are listed as a conditional use in the R1 zone, and sensitive land development permits for the sensitive lands on site, including floodplain SLDP 1-22, wetlands SLDP 2-22, slope hazard SLDP 3-22, and fish and riparian corridor SLDP 4-22. The site is 17.3 acres and located south of the Captain Roger Sierra Way and Southwest JP Road intersection. So, last time, as many of you know, we got through all of the oral testimony and we continued the meeting. So we're going to go over the rules again because we have to do that every time. Make sure it's clear. And then we're going to open up with the applicant's rebuttal statement. This is including all of the comments that were received in the open comment period through, what was the date that closed?
November 7th.
Through November 7th. All right. There's some more fun language. Consolidated quasi-judicial and limited land use hearing statement for the Planning Commission. I am calling this public hearing to order for the continuation of the Buxton Ranch Consolidated Application for subdivision, land development overlay zone change, conditional use, and sensitive lands development permits for floodplain, wetlands, slope hazard, and fish and riparian corridor. The Planning Commission will conduct this hearing in a quasi-judicial capacity for the conditional use, land development overlay, zone change, and the sensitive lands development permits. In other words, like a court trial where the Planning Commission serves as finders of fact based on the relevant approval criteria. Verbal testimony during the hearing is allowed for quasi-judicial decisions, which was completed during the first evidentiary hearing on October 27th. This is a consolidated hearing, and the subdivision application shall be processed as a limited land use decision, which does not take verbal testimony because it does not require interpretation or the exercise of policy or legal judgment. There shall be no audience demonstration or other conduct which would disrupt the hearing. Does any Planning Commission member wish to declare any ex parte contacts or conflicts of interest in this matter?
I have an ex parte contact. Joel Haugen had contacted me via email.
Bring the mic.
Joel Haugen had contacted me via email in September requesting if I had any land use attorney recommendations. I was not able to provide any recommendations. I don't know any land use attorneys, so I do not believe this will affect the process.
Nicely said. Does anybody else have any ex parte contacts they wish to bring up?
No.
Okay. Does any party wish to challenge any commissioner's impartiality or legal capacity to participate in this matter? Since this is a continuation of the previous hearing and the Planning Commission voted to stop the hearing after public testimony concluded, that prior to the applicant's rebuttal to all submitted testimony, the order of the hearing tonight will be rebuttal by the applicant, then a staff response. Thereafter, the hearing will be closed for consideration of the matter by the commission. Planning Commission will be making a recommendation to City Council on this application. All right. The applicant like to begin with their presentation, please.
Yeah, I think we're just about set. Good evening, Chair Jensen, members of the commission.
Mike.
It's better.
Yes, very.
I have to say it's odd because I talk into it when it's out here and it sounds the same as when I'm here. So
Yeah.
I'll, and I've got a cold, so I'm not hearing great anyway, but I'll do my best to make this work.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Garrett Stevenson. I'm Land Use Counsel for David Weekly Homes. With me next door here is Matt Sprague, who is our project manager. And you heard from him at the last hearing. He gave you a pretty thorough explanation of how the project worked, what the aspects of the project were. But we have the same team with us tonight that we had a couple of weeks ago. In case you have any questions, that includes our traffic consultant, I believe Jack Dalton is here, who's our natural resources consultant, and anybody else that's a necessary expert in this application. We wanted to make sure that we made those folks available to you tonight. So if any time you have questions and want to hear from one of them, let me know. I'm going to go ahead and just give a statement here that attempts to go over everything we heard in the public testimony, both oral and written. After that, I'm going to turn it over to Matt and see if he's got anything else he wants to talk about on the engineering and design side. But if you have any questions at any time, just stop me and let me know. So, you know, I really understand, and I firmly believe that David Weekley takes seriously all the comments that we've heard in this process. A lot of folks have argued that David Weekley and we have rushed into this, and I just want to make it clear on the record that that's not the case. The plan you have in front of you, and I had to double check because I haven't been involved with it entirely, but the plan you have in front of you took 2 years to develop or more. And that took a lot of time with staff to make sure that we were meeting all the criteria, to make sure that we were designing a project that was sensitive to natural resources on the site, the natural constraints of the site, but also fulfilling zoning goals for the project. And it's important to note that most of the public comments, I think you could fairly characterize at one point or another, express a lot of general hesitation about developing this site at all. And I can understand that. But the question about whether this site should be used for residential uses is not a question that is in front of this planning commission, nor will it be in front of the city council. That was a legislative decision to zone the property for residential uses and include it in the city's residential land inventory and buildable lands inventory. Property is zoned R1. It's part of the city's inventories for residential uses, and it's intended to be used as it's zoned. And the application is a balance between our goal to develop the property, the city's goal to have it be for residential uses, but also to protect Scappoose Creek and ensure that the resulting homes there can be used safely. So to that end, the application preserves 57% of the site. 57% will not be, I think it's actually 56.8. So as near as 57%, it makes no difference if this site is going to be reserved and preserved from development. Inside that area, you're going to have land reserved for parkland and a public pathway along the creek. The homes are going to be constructed substantially above 100-year floodplain level. And I know there's been concerns about how the project may affect that level, but I just want to point out that the floodplain has already been revised on this site once due to natural resource work that was done by Scappoose Bay Watershed Council and also the construction of the park to the north. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the major themes that we heard in terms of the concerns. Start with flooding concerns. We understand the community's concerns about flooding. And city has what I would call a very robust floodplain management program because Scappoose has a history of this sort of thing. We understand that. But the record is uniform in this application that the homes and the related improvements will be located above the floodplain. We have a complete hydraulic analysis that's provided by West Consultants that carefully map the impact of the project on the floodplain and determine what that's going to look like after it's done. That was submitted to FEMA, which then issued a conditional letter of map revision that said that the revision of the final flood map would be warranted if the project is constructed as proposed. Even the hydrologist that project opponents enlisted testified to you said that, and I'm paraphrasing what I heard him say, but he said the development in and around floodplains can be done safely. And this is Mr. John Archibald. He said that the project was not irresponsible, and he said that it meets all local, state, and federal regulations. So the record ultimately on the floodplain is clear. We have a tremendous amount of data that looks at what this is going to ultimately be. That's had the city staff review it. It's had FEMA review it. What's FEMA said if you build this, this is what the floodplain is going to look like, and your homes will be out of the floodplain. But ultimately, FEMA's decision is not a decision that is before the Planning Commission tonight. The question is, does our application meet the approval criteria that the city sets out? And the staff report does an excellent job of explaining why we do. As far as the flood hazard code goes, I know that there was some arguments about whether we could do certain improvements before we got that final letter of map revision. I think the staff report does a really good job explaining why the project is allowed in the flood hazard zone. Staff report also explains how the grading activities for the road and the other utilities, which have to happen before we build any homes at all, are allowed in the current floodplain. Those sections are 17.84.040 sub 3. Sub 3 allows utilities and roadway improvements in the existing floodplain. Sub 6 allows community recreation, such as bicycle and pedestrian paths in existing floodplains. Sub 7 allows public and private conservation areas. And sub 8 allows public works projects. All of these public projects, utilities, streets, all of that stuff goes in before the homes are built. So I just want to make it clear the code is very amenable to that. We talked with staff a number of times in development of this project to make sure we could do it. And the code is clear that we can. And I just want to mention too, I submitted a letter earlier this week that covers this in some detail. You may hear about staff on this, but I think that the code certainly allows us to go in and build these public improvements, which will have the effect of raising the floodplain, excuse me, not raising the floodplain, but will have the effect of raising the land out of the floodplain that we ultimately intend to build. The other issue that kind of came up was block length standard, and particularly about Eggleston Lane. Plan that you have in front of you dedicates Eggleston Lane to the south end of the property. What it doesn't do is it doesn't build all the way to the end of the property for a really good reason. There's wetlands there. And the code does not require us to build all the way to that south end of the property because it's not necessary to serve the project. And as a practical matter, I think that impacting those wetlands when you don't have a need from a traffic management standpoint, get into them would be a problem. Code also doesn't require a cul-de-sac at the end of Eggleston Lane for the simple reason that it would prevent a future connection to Eggleston Lane if that property to the south ever developed. And as I explained in my letter, you'd have a problem with consistency with the transportation system plan if you permanently capped that off with a cul-de-sac. Finally, there's no evidence in the record that additional pedestrian pathways are needed here. That would require development through the wetlands again, and the city engineer and school district have both looked at this and not asked for the type of additional connectivity that some of the opponents were asking for. The next thing I want to talk briefly about is stormwater. This is where Matt may want to jump in, correct me, but I'm going to try and paraphrase what we explained in our letter. There was some general assertions that our stormwater plan doesn't meet the standards. Stormwater plan was reviewed and approved by the city engineer. City standards require us to detain and treat for a 25-year storm event. Our plan is designed to detain and treat up to a 100-year storm event. And there were some concerns about controlled release in a storm event bigger than that that would overtop some of the detention ponds. But I want to be clear, that would only occur in an event that is far beyond the design requirements of the city's code. So it's not just that we're meeting the code, we're going far beyond it to make sure that we're capturing all the way up to that 100-year event. And so I think that might have been where some of the confusion was. On traffic, we have a complete traffic analysis in the record prepared by Kittleson and Associates and concluded that all study intersections meet their respective mobility standards today and after the development year, which is 2023. City engineer has reviewed this and concurs with Kittleson's findings. Whenever you have a project like this that's new in the neighborhood, you get concerns about traffic. I fully understand those. Typically, the trigger for a traffic impact study is roughly 40 homes or 400 trips. 48 homes. So we're barely over the threshold of what would require a traffic impact study in the first place. The last technical thing I wanted to address, which I didn't, and I apologize, I did not capture this in my letter, but there was an argument about a section of the comprehensive plan calling for policies for hazard areas. And that states that all development within the 100-year floodplain must meet federal HUD standards. I did not see these until I was made aware of it. But I did take a look at those HUD standards there in 24 CFR 58.6. And what they say essentially is that you can't put homes in a 100-year floodplain under HUD standards unless they have the opportunity to get flood insurance. There's a bunch of stuff in there about insurance, but I want to be clear, we're not proposing to construct any homes in the 100-year floodplain. And even if we were, they would not be prohibited as a matter of law. We'd have to go through the HUD standards to make sure people had flood insurance available to them. So I appreciate whoever raised that, but I don't think it's pertinent here. So with that, I just want to conclude before passing it over to Matt that, and this, I mean, I'll just conclude on a personal note. My entire extended family on my mom's side lives in Scappoose. My grandmother lives on Bella Vista. My uncle owns J&J Auto. I've mowed half the yards in Scappoose, and I've lived here 2 different times in my life. So to the extent it matters, and it shouldn't matter all that much, but I do take this very seriously because Scappoose has been my home periodically over the years, and I still come out here at least once or twice a month to see family. And I've driven by this site over the years, and I can understand why people want to see it remain the way it is. I mean, it's very pretty. It's a nice field. I'm sure people have enjoyed walking their dogs on it and doing other things. And I could say that about a lot of places in Scappoose that used to be fields that I remember as a kid. But the reason why we do this type of development here is because under the Oregon land use system, our goal is to develop within the city limits before we push out. And that's why this still has residential zoning on it. That's why we're not coming to you with a request to annex property or bring more into the urban growth boundary, because we're supposed to develop in first and then go out later. Understand it's a hard thing to do. I think a lot of people live in homes in places where before they were there, people were concerned about development of those homes. Natural, it's understandable. I don't fault people for concerns about that at all. I want to be clear that this is a case where we have to apply the applicable criteria, use the property as it's zoned, and as you've heard from staff and from us, you have a very, very good record, a very well thought out application, which demonstrates how all those criteria are met. Matt?
Okay, thanks. Matt Sprague with Pioneer Design Group. I just clarify that we've actually been working on this project since 2019 for design. And I'll be very frank that staff has put me through the ringer to ensure that we comply with all city standards, as well as that we meet all other jurisdictional requirements as well, such as federal and state. I would comment that there's 3 primary concerns that I've seen most often from the neighbors. That's flooding, it's traffic, and it's the riparian areas. So to touch a little bit more on what Garrett has shared, so this project, there's going to be no increase to the base flood elevation. And what that means, it's a no-rise design. So level of the 100-year floodplain today is going to be the same as the level of the 100-year floodplain tomorrow or after the project is constructed. So a property across the stream, for example, will see no difference to the elevation of the water in a 100-year flood event. All of the homes that are proposed within this subdivision, the one nearest to the floodplain will have a finished floor 2.5 feet above the floodplain elevation. Most of the homes will be substantially higher than that, especially as you move south and the grades get higher. But that is also more than 1 foot above the 500-year floodplain elevation. So we're very, very confident that the homes that are proposed within this project are not going to be in a flooding situation during a 100-year storm event. It would take something much greater than a 500-year storm event to put these homes in any kind of a danger. Traffic has been a concern. As mentioned, the project has complied with all the traffic requirements for the city. I would also mention there's going to be more than $100,000 in traffic impact fees that are generated by this project that the city can utilize in areas of concern. Their most important areas that they'd like to make adjustments to and fix. There'll be 600 lineal feet of improvements that'll occur to JP West Road. So that'll increase the capacity of JP West Road and its safety as well. To give you an idea of the trips, we talk about morning peak hour trips, we talk about evening peak hour trips, and that's the busiest hours of the day. So this project would generate 28 peak hour morning trips eastbound on JP West Road. So that's an average of one car every 2+ minutes. And then in the evening peak hour, that same eastbound direction is only 19 cars in the evening peak hour. So that's a car every 3 minutes. Getting on to riparian areas, all the stormwater from the project site is going to be directed into stormwater quality facility, which also serves as a detention facility. This detention facility, the detention facilities we are proposing, will accommodate a 100-year storm event. That is not a requirement of the city of Scappoose. So we're going above and beyond to ensure that we are accommodating additional detention for this project. The planting and replanting of substantial areas between Scappoose Creek and the development area itself, includes everything you see in the landscape plan. And in addition, all of the riparian area buffers from lot 18 all the way up to lot 25. Those are areas that we are not proposing to disturb as part of our floodplain modification. But they are going to be replanted in accordance with plant materials specified by West. They have to maintain the same level of roughness, essentially, to ensure that there are no alterations to the floodplain elevation. Those plantings are going to result in a substantially improved riparian area. Much more healthy and valuable and much better habitat than exists on that site today. It'll be a benefit to the city and the community as we move forward and those plants are established. No wetlands are being removed, 0. We have one tiny little impact that is actually on one of the slopes of the site. But that's a temporary impact just to connect a sanitary sewer to a sanitary sewer manhole. And that's for replacement of an existing city line that is at the end of its life and needs to be replaced at some point soon. So as a part of this project, we'll be able to work with the city to replace that sanitary sewer line so that we don't have a failure in the near future. There's a proposed public pathway. That is, I want to be clear, that's for all city residents. It has a public easement over it. It provides an extension of the trail system within the park across the street. So it's a little bit more opportunity for a little bit longer walk. There's more circulation. There's connecting path between. So you kind of create a block style of pathways throughout the area. And then finally, all of the resource tracts development rights will be given to the city of Scappoose. So the city of Scappoose will have control over development rights to all those natural resource tracts, even though they're owned by the homeowners association. It's a benefit to the city in that they don't have to own and maintain those specific tracts. They have public use of those tracts, and they have the potential to improve those tracts in the future for any type of project that the city may feel is a benefit to the public. And then finally, I'd like to say that I've been doing this for 30 years, and I've worked with a lot of national builders, and I've worked with a lot of small builders and medium-sized builders. And I've been working now for David Weekley for about 5 years, just under 5 years. And so we've done multiple projects with them. I can honestly tell you that they do care about the homes that they build. They do care about the people that buy those homes. And they do care about the communities that they do work in. You're not going to find that from all builders. But I can tell you that David Weekley is one of those that I would even buy one of their homes. So, and I grew up, my dad was a custom home builder. So, you know, the point was that if you didn't do it right, you were going to redo it. So I know what makes a quality home, and I really appreciate being able to work with David Weekley Homes. That's all I have.
Thanks, Matt. So at this point, wanted to open it up to see if you have any questions from any of our consultants. Got traffic, natural resources. Got you, got the folks from West on the floodplain. So if you have any questions that you don't feel like we answered adequately in our written materials or that you thought of during tonight's presentation, let us know. We'd be happy to answer those.
I think we'll ask for the staff response, and then we may be asking you guys to come back and answer some questions after that.
Okay. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you.
Appreciate your work.
Lori?
Thank you. Is this, okay, there we go. Okay, there we go. Thank you, commissioners, for being here tonight. We really appreciate it. There in your packets tonight, the city did receive 17 comments during the 10-day open period. These are will be entered into the record. The Planning Commission was forwarded these earlier this week. We do have a stack of them on the table back here, and they have also been placed on the city's website. And then the 18th comment that was sent out was the applicant's final written argument. And the Planning Commission is aware of this, but just for the benefit of the audience, I just want to take a brief moment first to say the Planning Commission's role tonight is to consider the facts before them to determine if the applicant has demonstrated that they have met the relevant approval criteria from the development code, related comprehensive plan policies, and implementing ordinances such as the Public Works Design Standards. So again, the Planning Commission's recommendation to council must be based on the approval criteria. Many of the issues raised, both orally and written testimony, didn't particularly focus on the approval criteria. Some did. But still, we just want to say that the city greatly appreciates that the citizens of the community have come to share their concerns and be part of this process. Additionally, many of the comments covered similar issues, so I won't go over those twice. And I'll be focusing my response on issues that relate to the approval criteria, since again, that's the basis for the recommendation to council. And then as I go along for Scappoose Development Code, I'm just going to shorten that up to SDC as I speak tonight. So just to start off, a lot of the comments touched on, the capacity of schools, city infrastructure, police, and others, and whether or not this proposal would burden any of these agencies or groups. The city is required to notice affected agencies of proposals to get their input prior to finalizing the staff report. And so I'll just read through those agencies that were noticed. The following city departments and agencies were noticed: City of Scappoose Departments, Engineering, Public Works, Police Department, Building Department, and City Manager. And then agency partners: Scappoose Rural Fire District, the Scappoose School District, Columbia County Public Works, Oregon Department of State Lands, Columbia River Peoples Utility District, Scappoose Bay Watershed Council, Columbia County Soil and Water Conservation District, Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife, Oregon Department of Land Conservation and Development, and then FEMA by way of the Clomer review. None of the city departments or agency partners commented in opposition to the development or recommended denial. Again, this is their opportunity to raise issues with the proposal so that staff is aware of any concerns by these agencies. So in response to some of the testimony we heard, one of the neutral testimony came from Leonard Applet, who lives south of the project site. So was not opposed to the development. He did mention that he requested improvements be made to Eggleston to the southern property, all the way to the southern property line, so that future costs to extend the road on Buxton are not borne by future developments to the south. So the applicant is proposing to improve additional frontage along JP West Road for intervening properties that are not on the Buxton frontage. And this is in consideration of not providing improvements to the southern property at this time. This would give an immediate benefit of improved safety by way of additional sidewalks on the south side of JP West for a distance of approximately 260 feet. Again, that's the portion not on their frontage. And then additionally, the conditions of approval include the requirement to record a non-remonstrance agreement. And so that in the future, if the southern property owner wants to develop, wants to complete the remaining portion of the road, they could petition council to form a local improvement district. And what that does is, in that case, the cost for that section of road would be assessed proportionally to the properties benefiting from the improvement, including the 48 lots in the subdivision. In other words, they could not say no, that they don't want to participate, because they would be using that road. And that was, again, that's already in the conditions of approval. So I'm going to touch on some of the floodplain comments that we heard that relate to approval criteria next. So Mr. Kobach's letter stated that the city could not have stormwater facilities in the floodplain. This is incorrect. 17.84040B3 allows for installation, reconstruction, or improvement of underground utilities or roadway improvements in the existing floodplain. The grading plan is necessary to construct the proposed extension of Eggleston Lane, and the 2 stormwater detention ponds are necessary to treat stormwater runoff from the roads. They are interrelated to the proposed roads that are permitted in the existing floodplain. The applicant's preliminary stormwater report clearly explains why the proposed catch basins are necessary to treat runoff from roadways, and that's regardless of whether they also treat some stormwater from homes. Additionally, 17.84040B8 allows public works projects to be constructed in the floodplain. This is defined in the code as projects that are necessary to enhance or maintain the general public welfare. Such projects may include, but are not limited to, flood control structures, public buildings, city infrastructure, utilities, parks, and projects associated with resource protection. This definition does not state that the public works projects must be completed by a public agency. The work associated with the stormwater ponds requires plans meeting the requirements of the Public Works Design Standards and require a Public Works permit to demonstrate compliance with the Public Works Design Standards and the municipal code. Furthermore, these facilities are considered public since they will maintain the general public welfare by protecting the public from flooding conditions, by capturing, detaining, and treating runoff from public streets. Examples of other projects developed under these conditions can be found in Veterans Park, Chief Concomly Park, Mearsburg Plan Development, Johanna Subdivision, and the Creekside Apartments. Additionally, the city has a condition of approval, it's number 35, that tracks C and G, the stormwater tracks, shall be subject to a public storm drainage easement. And this is required by the Public Works Design Standards. The city does not have a public storm system in this region of the cities, and these facilities act as public infrastructure. Mr. Kobach's letter also asserts that with respect to any condition requiring the applicant to obtain a LOMAR, and that's the letter of map revision, the applicant must show that compliance with that condition of approval is reasonably certain to succeed. Again, this is precisely why the applicant was required to obtain CLOMAR, that's the conditional letter of map revision approval, of their project prior to submitting for land use approval. This is essentially FEMA's approval of the subsequent LOMAR. This gives assurance to the city that they will approve the post-construction letter of map revision once construction of the site is complete as shown on their plans. There is no provision in the development code for the city to second guess FEMA's determination. Also, Mr. Kobach argues that there is no city process to review the already approved tentative plan for compliance with FEMA's decision on the letter of map revision, which is incorrect since the city also requires final plat approval. And that's exactly what allows the city to check the tentative subdivision plan for compliance with FEMA's approval, as well as all the conditions of approval for the project. In fact, if you see condition of approval number 39, it states the applicant shall not submit the phase 2 final plat application until FEMA has issued a letter of map revision based on the approved CLOMR. No building permits for phase 2 lots will be issued until FEMA has issued the letter of map revision, which indicates that all phase 2 lots are no longer within the mapped 100-year floodplain. This provides the city absolute assurance that no lots will be platted in phase 2 until the lots are no longer in the floodplain. If for any reason the letter of map revision were not approved, the applicant would have a few options. They could either make a revision to their grading plan that would still comply with the city floodplain standards so that they could still seek a letter of map revision, which is likely what they would do. They could also apply for individual letter of map revisions for the phase 2 areas that have not yet been platted based on the current elevation of the lots being above the base flood elevation. Or they could plat the remaining phase 2 areas with 20,000 square foot minimum lot sizes. For any contiguous lots that don't add up to the 20,000, the applicant could keep those as additional open spaces or park spaces. But there are options is the point I'm trying to make. We heard from Jennifer Hancock that there appears to be a conflict with the city's community rating system that we participate in, which helps our residents have discounted flood insurance. And because when you're part of that system, it means you have higher NFIP minimum standards. It was also stated that encroaching on designated floodways is a violation of SDC 17.84.180. So the higher floodplain development standards are already incorporated into Chapter 17.84, so there is no conflict there. For instance, if the city did not have these higher standards, the applicant would not have had a requirement to provide a cut fill balance. In other words, they would have been able to place fill in the floodplain fringe, not the floodway, but the fringe, which is the 100-year outside of the floodway. So they would have been able to place fill in the floodway fringe without taking out an equal amount of material, so long as they could show that they don't increase the base flood elevation by more than a foot. However, we do have a cut fill balance, and the city implements a no rise policy. They cannot have any rise to the base flood elevation. The city also required that the applicant apply for a letter of map revision to reflect the current conditions on the site prior to submitting their land use application. This also we also had them apply for their conditional letter of map revision prior to submitting as well. So, in which surpasses FEMA standards. So typically the process for something like this in another city where they didn't have the higher standards is that they would, a city would require the conditional letter of map revision prior to construction and then a letter of map revision after. And again, the city required the letter of map revision first, then the conditional letter of map revision, and then we're requiring a letter of map revision after as well. So we are asking, obviously, for above NFIP minimum standards. And then as proposed by the plans before you, the project would increase flood storage capacity by 9 cubic yards compared to what is there today. In relation to the code section that she felt was in violation, 17.84.180, The applicant proposes minor grading in the floodway resulting in a cut but no fill. The applicant does not propose any fill or encroachments, new construction, parking, or substantial improvements in the floodway. And this is in conformance with 17.84.180. The applicant has submitted the required detailed hydrologic and hydraulic analysis to ensure that the minor grading proposed would not result in an increase to the base flood elevations. We heard from several neighbors that the city should utilize something other than the FEMA floodplain maps when reviewing this application. However, that would be a violation of SDC 17.84.030B, which requires that we base our decisions on the adopted floodplain maps for the city issued by FEMA. It does not say that we can evaluate the floodplain under any other criteria or mapping, including a future unknown condition. To do so would be a clear violation of our development code. We also heard testimony requesting that the applicant study the entire South Scappoose Creek watershed as part of their project, similar to a study undertaken by the Scappoose Drainage Improvement District on the east side of town, which they are in the process of updating floodplain maps as part of their effort to recertify the dike. This was done on the east side of town because it's evaluating the flood risk associated with the levee, which affects a large portion of the east side of the city and many of the county lands. This project seeks to revise a small portion of the floodplain boundary on one distinct parcel. The applicant completed an in-depth analysis of this revision, which extended 1,500 feet downstream of JP West Road and 22 feet upstream of EM Watts Road. This analysis is to ensure that the base flood elevation on not just the project site, but also upstream and downstream of the project site will not increase the base flood elevation. Again, the project results in no rise, and this is required by our code. Related to the circulation plan, let's see, we received several comments about the circulation plan, and that was submitted by the applicant. It's included on page 238 of your packets. And so there were comments about this as something that's already in the works and we need to be talking about this now. That is not the case. So our code, SDC 17.150.020H, requires that all subdivision proposals include neighborhood circulation plans to show how properties within 300 or within 500 feet could be developed with streets and lots in the future. It does not guarantee that exact alignment, but they have to demonstrate that they're essentially not, holding up any other lots from developing. It also shows that how lots could be platted in the future that would meet our requirements. So the applicant was complying with the provision. It's required by our code. Any future subdivision of those lands would have to apply for land use approval prior to development. Proper noticing would be provided prior to a decision being made by the Planning Commission. Again, that's not part of this proposal. It was a requirement from our land use code. Let's see here, related to traffic, we did hear some traffic concerns. Garrett touched on this also, but I will just say that the applicant's required to complete the traffic study according to our traffic study impact guidelines. That is what they did. As you heard previously, the study was completed. It determined that all study intersections are meeting their respective performance measures and mobility targets today and after the site build-out conditions. The city cannot then ask for off-site improvements related to this project, as some comments have suggested, since there would be no data to support the request and it would be considered a taking from the applicant, which would be a basis for appeal by the applicant. Related to block length standards, the COBAC letter claims that the city failed to meet its block length standards by not exploring a connection to Day Street. However, the development code allows for an exception to the block length standard when natural conditions such as wetlands or stream corridors preclude a local street connection, which is indeed the situation on this parcel to the east. The code then goes on to say that when such conditions exist, a pedestrian access way shall be required in lieu of a public street connection if the access way is necessary to provide safe, direct, and convenient circulation and access to nearby destinations such as schools, parks, stores, etc. Staff does not find that an access way to Day Street is necessary to provide safe, direct, and convenient circulation and access to nearby destinations such as schools, parks, stores, etc. And this is since there's a park directly north of the site. If they were to connect to Day Street, it would take a person out of direction of that amenity. There's a middle school east of Day Street, which we know. However, staff does not find that this is a necessary connection to the school since there are bus routes that pick up students on JP West, which provide a safe and direct route to all of the schools from that location. Further, the transportation system plan does not show a future local connection, street connection, or a shared use path, or a sidewalk connection from Day Street to the project site. Koback letter also claims that the applicant is trying to avoid city requirements and limitations on cul-de-sacs. However, SDC 17154-040C3 states that a cul-de-sac shall only be used where the city engineer and planner have determined that environmental or topographical constraints, existing development patterns, or compliance with other applicable city requirements preclude a street extension. The applicant is dedicating right-of-way to the southern property boundary, which is in conformance with the transportation system plan, which shows a future extension of Eggleston Lane to the south. Therefore, the applicant did not provide a cul-de-sac in this subdivision, nor would the city have requested or allowed it at this time since it is anticipated the road can extend to the south in the future. Mr. Kovacs suggests that the applicant must show that Eggleston Lane is reasonably likely to extend to the south. However, the code clearly states that the city engineer and planner are the ones to make the call on cul-de-sac construction. Related to compatibility with surrounding neighborhoods. So we did hear testimony that the Buxton Ranch plan development is not compatible with surrounding neighborhoods. The SDC states in relation to compatibility, the plan development shall present an organized arrangement of buildings, facilities, open spaces, and improvements, such as recreation facilities, landscaping, and fencing to ensure compatibility with the comprehensive plan in the area in which it is to be located. This application proposes all of the amenities mentioned, and this site is adjacent to 3 different zoning districts. It's adjacent to the R1, which is low density, R4, which is moderate density, and A1, which is high density, along its southeast border. The R1 zoning district then is not the sole zoning district to use as the basis for compatibility, as several have suggested. Further, the city has previously approved planned developments with lot sizes ranging from 2,660 square feet to 10,210 square feet in the South Fork planned development as recently as 2015. And in that development, there were side setbacks approved by the city council of 3 feet. Whereas this proposal involves lot sizes from 3,410 square feet to 13,083 square feet, and the side setbacks are proposed at 5 feet for internal lots and 8 feet for street side setbacks. The development is utilizing the planned development overlay because there are natural resources to protect on the site. This is the main purpose of the overlay. Additionally, the applicant is proposing single-family detached homes, which are compatible with the majority of surrounding developments, with the exception of the apartment development in the southeast corner of the site in the A1 zoning. And then in relation to the statewide planning goals, we saw several people comment on how the city, is not meeting those goals with this plan. again, the city is not amending the comprehensive plan. There was not a need to reply to the statewide planning goals in the staff report. However, we did provide this anyway. The Oregon Department of Land Conservation and Development, who is tasked with governing the statewide planning goals, did review the application. They did not find any conflicts with the application in relation to the goals. In summary, staff finds that the application does meet the applicable approval criteria, comprehensive plan policies, and implementing ordinance, and still recommends that the Planning Commission make a recommendation of approval to City Council on this application, including the 20 conditions, including the 52 conditions of approval. That concludes my initial response.
Does anybody want to ask any questions of staff?
Reading through on the HOA maintenance of, flood material and so on, what is the actual cure for ensuring that they do so? Does the HOA structurally has the ability to change what their policies are or even what their costs are on a per annum? What insurance does the city have that will actually maintain those flood deterrents?
So the applicant will be required to record against the property a maintenance and access covenant for the storm facility that'll have requirements that the developer's engineer and myself work out so that they're applicable to facility, because each facility is a little bit different. I provide most of the boilerplate language for that. And it's, we look at the HOA agreement and the costs that have been allocated for maintenance to make sure that they're reasonable. And we've worked with all of the previous subdivisions on exactly that same thing to make sure that there's adequate funding for that and there's mechanisms in place for funding for those facilities. In terms of compliance, we ask within that maintenance agreement that the HOA provide deficiency reports if they're noted twice a year. There's a specific maintenance routine that's called out, and they should identify deficiencies at that time and then notify me of those deficiencies and their plan to remediate them. I worked with Dutch Canyon on just such a thing a few years back. I met with their HOA, their board. We met on site several times to discuss it. So those things do happen. If I don't get notified and I see issues, I'll take it upon myself to issue deficiency notices directly to the HOA and require them to take action under the maintenance requirements that are recorded against the project. And then we'll follow up to make sure that they happen. And then lastly, if we don't see action on those maintenance items, we have within our code the ability to go in, perform the maintenance because we have access rights. And then we can, we would obviously notify the property HOA that we're going to do that. And then we can bill those costs back to the HOA.
I have two questions.
Please.
Regarding SDC chapter 17.86, sensitive land slope hazard, section 17.86.070A 1 through 8. The recommended conditions of approval require the applicant to follow the recommendations of the geotechnical report. Can city staff confirm that groundwater sources in slope hazard areas, potential flooding risks to lots adjacent to wetland areas located in tracts B and F due to groundwater sources and weather events, and water seepage at the base of the proposed retaining wall on the western edge of the site has been addressed in the submitted geotechnical report and will be mitigated based on the recommendations of the geotechnical report.
Is that a question?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I thought it was a statement.
Oh, sorry. Can you confirm that the groundwater sources, firstly, the slope hazard areas. And then also the potential flooding risks in houses, lots adjacent to tracks B and F where the
And
wetlands are.
this is the discussion about, the back drainage, yeah.
So at this level of design, we typically don't, and especially as a part of the land use application, we don't typically ask the developers in what particular manner they're going to protect the homes from groundwater sources like that. You know, incidental seepage, because the building code sort of addresses that. In this case, once we get into design, since it's well known that there's drainage coming from the upper slope, and particularly off of the two wetland areas, which we know are just groundwater that's following those pipe trenches. We've asked the design team, the engineer, to look at that and make sure that it's mitigated. And they installed a catch basin to pick up that drainage specifically. With regard to the homes, each builder typically would have their own kind of a scheme for how they want to handle that. They might propose to do a 5-foot easement across the back of the lots and have a French drain system installed with catch basins on the surface to pick up drainage. They may decide to do a swale along the entire length of the back of the lots, which is what D.R. Horton does, and then pick it up at the end of that. There's a number of ways to do that. Some builders want each lot to have an independent surface drainage system, pick up that so that that system doesn't rely on the neighbor's system in case it's damaged. So there's just a number of ways to address that. Didn't get into the nuance of it. It's typically, it's more of a building code type thing. It falls under plumbing code. So the building official will really review and approve that. I don't have that purview, but we do ask that the engineer think ahead to allow for picking up that drainage in the public system somewhere that there'd be a connection point, and we'd ask them to look at locations to do that.
The one other question I have is regarding chapter 17.84 sensitive lands flooding. Section 17.84.140D regarding potential flooding of Eggleston Lane near the intersection with JP West Road, and if there could become a safety concern for residents along the new road. Can city staff confirm, based on the preliminary grading plan, which is Exhibit 4F, and the preliminary street and storm plan and profile of Eggleston, and which is Exhibit 4I, that the roadway will experience 2 inches of water depth near the center line, which increases to approximately 7 inches at the eastern curb?
Yes, we were concerned as well about that, as we would be on any project where we don't like to see roads that might be inundated in the 100-year. But in this case, JP West is, the elevation of JP West is in the 100-year. So obviously, in order to tie into it, you have to get to that elevation. We did provide some leeway for the intersection grades so that the half street will be, the cross slope will be minimized to minimize that impact, to raise the elevation as much as possible. In so much that we could do that under AASHTO's geometric design for roadways. And we can't violate some of those design standards that are, embedded in our public works design standards as, ancillary documents we have to follow. The plans, I had PDG identify the maximum elevation of floodwaters during the 100-year at that low point where the intersection occurs. It's 0.13 feet, which is just over an inch. So based on the shed section at that location, one of the curbs will be a few inches underwater and the other curb will be exposed, which shows up. You can see that on one of the exhibit sheets. I think it's on the grading plan. It's the blue line. Um,
And then
Is that it?
the duration.
Oh, and then, yeah, just to speak a little bit about duration. The creek is, it's fairly flashy. It'll rise up pretty quickly, but it also falls very quickly once the rain event is over. And so, in what I've witnessed in 100-year events on JP West, I've seen those floodwaters recede within 15 to 30 minutes of the event peak. So not after 24 hours, but after the peak of the event. So very soon after the maximum intensity rainfall, you can see it drop. So I wouldn't anticipate that would be an impact for more than, like I said, 15 minutes to 30 minutes. And it's what I've witnessed and recorded and have photographic evidence of that occurring.
Any other questions for staff at this time?
I have one question, probably for Chris. I think I have an understanding of your reasoning for the street Eagleston Lane length 2,000 exceeding that, and we'll
Mhm.
rationalize. You can change that. But question is, what other developments have we had around here that do that, have exceeded that 2,000?
South Fork was another planned development that exceeded block length standards by quite a bit. Think of some other ones. Kale Street violates it.
Okay.
I mean, I could give you a more complete answer, but I'd have to do a little research
But
on
there are
GIS.
other examples where.
Yeah.
I mean, typically anywhere along the creek where you're going to see, that crop up just because it's not, it's hard to have, make those connections.
Okay.
It's just economically challenging. And then the benefit, you have to look at the benefit of it as well. Where is it? In the case of the route to school, if the kids were to get on the bus at Day Street at about 7:15, they'd be on the bus for 45 minutes before they got back to the middle school. Versus if they got on the bus at JP West, they'd be there in like 5 minutes. I'm not sure why they would think that would be more convenient. Unless they just like riding buses.
Okay.
Anything else?
Debating if it's for city or for the.
Ask the question and
Then
they will sort it out.
In traffic analysis, it was noted that the actual assessment took place in 21. So that would be during time periods of heavy work from home cycle, as well as, depending on the timeline, school from home cycles. Have the COVID situation, is that something that we need to take into account structurally? Because the numbers being presented seem just low given the density being proposed. And I'm assuming it's because the assessment took place during a time when average traffic was different.
That's a great question. Traffic engineers think a lot about things like that. I don't, but for background traffic, they have a factor that they use. I'd like to have their engineer speak more specifically about that math. I'm not that familiar with it, but I know they compensate for the background during, when they're doing traffic counts, perhaps in the summer when school's not in and things like that. They have ways to account for those differences. And I would, if you would like them to speak more on that, I welcome you to get that from them.
Perfect. Now that I'll double that question when we get to that then.
We want to just have the,
Yeah.
would the traffic engineer like to?
Would that be okay? That would be lovely. I'd love the assessment on how that took place.
So carefully, but also this is something that we became pretty well accustomed to over the last couple of years of doing traffic studies during COVID.
Really speaking into the mic, please.
And so what we did as part of this study is not unlike what we've done as part of a number of other studies over the last couple of years, which is that we we apply, for this particular study, we apply both a seasonal adjustment factor, which takes into consideration fluctuations in traffic along US 30 throughout the year. And then we also take into consideration what we have started calling the COVID factor, which is this reduction in traffic, primarily on the minor street related to some of the local circulation as opposed to the through traffic. And that way, what we've found throughout the state is that the different times of the day, the different days of the week, there are differences in what those adjustment factors are. So what we typically do is we look at historical counts, we look at the types of volumes that we're seeing during those time periods. We make adjustments to those counts, compare them to our counts. It's a little bit more of an art than a science, but in the end of the day, what we're aiming to do is to ramp up those 2021 traffic counts to reflect a condition that is more like a 2022 or during a typical peak time period. So it's just to answer you directly, it's a combination of adjustment factors that we apply as well as just raw volume counts that we apply based on historical data.
So from layman's standpoint, like I know that there is historic information on 30. You took a look at that, look at the delta, and kind of created a grading factor associated to the delta there.
That's absolutely correct. And beyond Highway 30, we have counts along Highway 30 that show what those what the Maples and the JP West streets look like. So we can also make adjustments to those streets to account for those changes.
Just for clarification, you talked about those factors, and I know the answer, but where does the data for that factor come from?
So the Oregon Department of Transportation collects data along all of their facilities 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, and they have been doing it for a long time. So with that data, we're able to see what those seasonal fluctuations look like and and we can go back several years and we can make comparisons between 2017, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, and see how things have changed historically.
Thank you. Any other questions on traffic while he's sitting here as he's trying to run away? Sorry, there's no public comment. Anybody else have anything on? Thank you.
Massive nudge. I actually have one more for City. I just
Please go.
several comments that came in talked about green space constantly, reading the application and so on. What currently is there is not green space, correct? It is farm, field, and private. It's not
Correct.
actually
So there,
green space.
so yes, it's been farmed for years, pasture land. Well, I should say it's been pasture land. And then obviously you have your resources and your riparian buffer zone adjacent to the creek, and there are wetlands on the site, which would be maintained.
Just wanted to make crystal clear.
Yep, absolutely.
Lori, can you ballpark how long that property has been zoned as R1?
I have not done that research. However, I would assume it's been for quite some time.
That's, yeah, since you've been here, and that's been a while.
Oh yeah, I mean, yeah. Well, it was residential back in, was it 2006 when this came before the commission before? So at least since then.
So nearly 20 years that we're 100% sure on.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else? Moment? All right. Then I am going to close the hearing and we will move on to deliberations. So close the hearing at 8:13. And now we get to discuss. Anybody want to lead us off?
I have some comments for clarification for the record.
Yeah.
Okay, so regarding ordinance 862, which is the 2017 Scappoose Parks, Trails, and Open Space Plan. This ordinance, which includes the site identified as a potential park site for a park. However, ordinance 862 is not an implementing ordinance and did not enact development regulations. The site is zoned R1 by the comprehensive plan and not zoned for park use. Additionally, the owner of the property is able to determine use of the site consistent with the comprehensive plan zoning. None of the owners on the property in map 4 of the Scappoose Parks Trails and Open Space Plan are obligated to develop their site as a park, nor does it obligate the city to purchase those properties. Because of these reasons, the applicant is not required to respond to Ordinance 862. The second one is regarding Chapter 17.89 Sensitive Lands, Fish and Riparian Corridor Overlay, Section 17.89.090 A through C. City staff has confirmed that the recommendations from ODFW have been addressed by the applicant, including expansion of water quality facilities to reduce runoff impacts on the stream, as well as to slow water entering the creek during high water events. Recommended conditions of approval require the applicant to implement stormwater management in conformance with the Public Works design standards, which shall include clarification that the stormwater facilities are in fact retention facilities rather than detention facilities as described in the stormwater report. This distinction is important due to the actual function of these types of facilities and their corresponding Public Works design standard criteria. This is more of a matter of discussion.
That's where we're at, so discussion.
And so then regarding Chapter 17.81 Plan Development Overlay, Section 17.81050 A through C, the residential area and density calculation is as shown in the table on page 51 of the staff report, which subtracts out street rights of way, streams and wetland buffers outside of the floodplain, and floodplain areas based on the current LOMAR to determine the net area. The net area is then divided by the required 6,000 square feet to determine the allowed base density of 46 units. The staff report confirms that the base density calculation of 46 units is in compliance with the city standards. Further, up to 25% more dwelling units may be permitted, up to an additional 11.5 units, whereas the applicant is requesting a 4% increase of 2 additional units. The code states that this increase may be granted upon a finding by the Planning Commission that such increased density contribute to A, satisfaction of the need for additional urban area housing of the type proposed, B, the provision of housing which is convenient to commercial, employment, and community services and opportunities, C, the creation of a land use pattern that is complementary to the community and its identity and to the community design process, D, conservation of energy, E, the efficient use of transportation facilities, and F, the effective use of land and available utilities and facilities. And the staff report found each of these factors to be satisfied. Sounds like it's planning commission discussion.
Yeah. And I just want to remind commissioners that we need to speak to the criteria because that's all we get to look at. Need to be fair to everybody that wants to develop, and that's why we have to stick to the criteria. Anybody want to run with that? I'll go. I think it's, yeah, looks to me like they're not trying to just maximize value. They picked a number that worked for them. He said a 4% increase when I think he said it could go to 25%. So, you know, that's, to me, that's the sort of thing that speaks to something, you know, they're wanting to respect our city and in the intentions of our code, not just try to maximize every little ounce they can get.
I do worry about the smallest of the lots. The 35-foot minimum is a concern. I understand where we're at code wise, but the minimum versus the mean is something that makes me pause.
Yeah. That may be something that when the next code revision comes up.
Yeah.
You know, the city could look at, or we could ask the city to look at.
Agreed.
Well, I guess I should make some comments here now.
I depend on you for this.
Having been around a long time through all of this, I can tell you right now, it's probably the most difficult one I've had to deal with in many, many years. So, and it's because of the fact that we're trying to do something that is right for developers, but also right for the community, and do something that we know that we will not regret later down the road. And we have basically two sides with lawyers that each side builds a case for each one. We have to decide whether or not we feel which one fits the needs. As our criteria, which is what I was just about to say. And because of that, and because of our requirements as commissioners, we have to fit that in. That's the ultimate reason that we make a commission decision, and also keeps LUBA off of us. We have to be careful. It's not because we just want to do everything that we can, which we'd love to do. I can tell you when they've run this by the city before, it was definitely turned down for good reasons. It didn't get past the criteria as far as the city was concerned, commission, and so it didn't go forward. They've spent a lot of more time trying to make sure that they can put together a proposal of a development that can pass that criteria. And so that's their argument. The other side, you know, I can understand where the public's coming from, really can. There's not many of us that haven't been by there when it was flooding and have seen the water that's there. And we get concerned what's going to happen for people downstream a little bit, people who are in the lowland and other things like that. And anything that does this stuff, we want to make sure it fits. So anyway, keeping that in mind, very hard to do, but I would say our thing is going to be making a recommendation to city council. And city council will have to make the ultimate decision on this. But from the perspective of us, we have to follow what we have to follow and with the criteria that's been given to us. And there was another thing that was always a little concerning to me from one side, but from the fact that all this information is given out in advance to all these organizations, we got nothing back, was a negative to doing this. I was thinking that we might hear something from someone that said, you know, the fire department or whoever it might be, hey, I don't want this, or, you know, the city or the city engineers or somebody that says, no, we can't do this, but we're not really seeing that either. More concerned about so-called livability, at low cost and low income, you know, operations that they were talking about. Affordable housing, I guess, is the term I'm really trying to think of. Affordable housing can be done one of many ways, and one is you buy in those kinds of properties because they're less expensive than doing it up on the hill with a view, you know. So, you know, you can play a little bit more with that profit margin and stuff like that. And finally, I guess, look at my notes here, what I've done over the time here. They reach a point where they have to go back to FEMA 2 and say, look, okay, I've changed these things. Can I move forward? There's a possibility they could say, no, you can't. You know, this is the end of your development, phase 1 or whatever. So that's another thing to consider. Those are my thoughts, throwing them out there.
And I think it's not on us to decide if it's money works out. That's why the applicant does this kind of work ahead of time, then gets land use approval. So they know that if they meet these criteria, if they do these things these ways, they can do the thing they want to do.
Yeah. I know that we have nothing but positive things on the side of the proponents. We have had some negative feedback as far as, from Better Business Bureau, that kind of thing. And I just hope that what I'm reading is not correct, because we do want a good development. Something that will be there that we can say, look, we made this decision, we'll live with it, and we hope that it's right,
And there's a lot of process after us.
right.
Make sure that they're towing the line. Any other comments? Bruce?
Well, I'll just reiterate, though, I don't think we approve or disapprove a recommendation to the council. Am I solid in that?
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure. So it really comes down to both sides, if have all those criteria been not, do you feel there's a question? And this has been very difficult. I'll admit right up front, there's no way I could have gone through all of this material in the time I honestly don't know if everything. I mean, because there's just insufficient time to review all this. I don't know about the rest of you. Did you read every page?
Tried to.
You're practically
I did.
retired.
A lot of pages there,
I read
548 or
through it.
whatever it is.
Been on a planes a lot. I was gonna say, no, it's the
And March.
Anything you'd like to do?
No, I pretty much say this.
Point of order, we can't hear online.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Everybody speaking to the mic.
Very closely.
Yes, exactly.
I had a lot of questions and provided those to city staff. I had answers that were satisfactory to my questions, and so it appears to me that conditions have been I don't have any outstanding questions, concerns.
Also keep in mind, no matter what we decide and what the city decides, there's still an opportunity to go ahead and appeal to Luba or somebody like that, correct?
Yeah.
And there are lawyers, so they can help work that, navigate that, so.
Anybody have anything else they want to kick out? I'll just add a last comment that when I hear staff has been working with them for a long time and staff has said that's been at least not an adversarial experience. And I don't recall, but I think you said it's been a pretty reasonable working experience, right?
Mhm. They did what we asked
It's been,
repeatedly.
it was 3 years on the design side, and it was more than that before that
It was
happened.
more than that.
Because I was dealing with Mike Robinson on flood issues, Clomar, Lomar, I think well prior to 2019.
Yeah.
It feels like it's been like had a lot more hair when this first hit my desk is what it's feeling like.
Okay. Anything else that you guys want to talk about? Otherwise, I think we're getting to where we need to start. Okay, you guys all have cheat sheets for the motion, so we do it right.
Notice that too.
just so many
Yes. Fortunately, we don't have a better way to do that.
Well, nobody else is gonna move forward. It's easier to say I second that, I guess. I move that the planning commission recommend approval of the application to city council and accept the findings and conditions of approval in SB 1-22 ZC 122, CU 122, and SLDP 122, 222, 322, and 422. Staff report dated October the 20th, 2022.
Seconded.
It's been moved and seconded to recommend for approval to the city council. Is there any further discussion? All right, seeing no further discussion, I will call the vote. All those in favor, say aye.
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 All those opposed? Passed. Made our recommendation. So I'm going to go ahead and say we're going to take a break for 5 minutes. And I know many of you don't want to stay for the exciting calendar discussion we're going to have for about 5 minutes. But so if you can, if you're not staying, if you can move out of the room so we can finish up the meeting. But thank you, everybody, for being here. We appreciate your participation.
Oh.
I meant to ask you.
Oh, that was the.
I know, and I remembered it as I was saying it. I'm like, shit. It's okay. No, we used to do that. It's not like a subjective thing. It's like factual.
Right. Yeah.
Thanks for speaking.
Oh, that might be
Okay.
Common sense arguments there.
Like,
The thing is,
it's for the
Okay.
so on.
Hey, NJ, can you hear us?
Yes.
Thank you.
Say, have we 5 minuted?
We
Yeah.
did. Yeah.
All right.
All right. Great. With our outstanding audience remaining, we are going to pick the meeting back up and we are on to item 6, communications. So the calendar check. Very back of the packet. Let's see. Planning Commission meeting, 7 PM on the 17th. Yay! 21st, there's a council work session with PCC and OMIC at 6, city council meeting at 7. 24th and the 25th, the city offices are closed. Coming into December, city council work session at 6 and city council at 7 on Monday, the 5th. Planning Commission meeting at 7 PM on Thursday, the 8th. And that's going to be Oxbow, right?
Yes.
On Monday, the 12th, city council work session at 6, city council meeting at 7. Thursday, the 15th, economic development committee at noon, and then the Parks and Rec committee meets at 6. And Thursday, the 22nd, no planning commission meeting. And the 23rd, city offices are closed. And the 26th, city offices are closed. That's the calendar check. All right, any commissioner comments?
Just for the record, I think everyone did a good job on the balancing out the challenges here. This was a huge packet, like very huge, with a lot of things to think about. So I appreciate everyone's focus on this. I know I got lost several times and had to go back.
Yeah.
So
It can get to be dense material.
I was just saying, I didn't like having to read the lawyer responses. I had to read them 3 times.
Right.
This is harder to be.
do have to look up specific ordinances.
Mhm.
These
Yeah,
ones.
well, I think the city had, they at one point had given us all surface tablets if we wanted to, so we could do this. Before that, we had to bring binders slightly
Yeah,
larger than this
yeah,
with the
yeah.
city ordinances. But yeah, I mean, it's a lot of stuff and we have to lean on staff a lot.
Is there anything,
That's the
That-
difference between staff and volunteer.
Right?
Lori, is there anything that we can do when things get this big where we can't change those timelines? I mean, that's what you were saying, we got a year or two, here's what it is, and this is as soon as we can get it out, this is as soon as you can to us.
We tried.
How do those get set and how can we change them?
So staff reports due 7 days before the hearing, always.
But what sets that? I mean,
It's in our
that
code. It's
be-
in our
It's in the
code.
code. It would
Yeah, so
council.
code change then, that's the answer.
So the thing
Okay,
is
I
that,
just wanted to know.
well, I do want to provide some context because we send out, so when the application's deemed complete,
Mhm.
that kind of starts the ball rolling, right? So we're noticing agency partners, we're noticing other city departments, like I have to give them time to respond back. We have to have time then to incorporate comments that may come back or issues that we have to work out. And so
Do other agencies feel that they don't have enough time?
I don't know because I haven't had an opportunity to ask. You could ask around and
I
see.
would like to talk to the fire.
I-
I mean, right, I mean, my first conversation would be with that. You know, and
And
how do you
we,
get trucks in someplace? How do you get them?
Yeah.
you know what Jeff
I-
told, what Jeff said to me, Fire Chief Pritchard, is that he loves that the houses have sprinklers because it's like having your own fire
was a
department
redeeming
in the house.
That was.
He really did not have an issue. He did have an issue with the fact that, and we should talk about this, like separate.
Yep, that's fine. I just want to know how things change.
For the timeline, I will think about that. I don't know. I will think about that, and I appreciate the feedback.
Based on the size.
It's literally, it's just the amount of work that had to go into it. We wanted to get it to you 2 weeks early. We worked extremely hard to
I
do
mean,
that,
I
and
don't
it
know how
just didn't happen.
I don't even know how it would have.
Right.
With the amount of staff and how many people are working on
That's
it.
exactly,
I mean,
that's exactly right.
so it just seems like, well, if a code change is what's necessary to give the amount of staff time on the thing.
So the thing is that the second we deem the application complete, we have 120 days to render a decision, including the resolution of all appeals at the city level. So our clock starts ticking immediately. So
That's,
we would love, and hopefully, I wouldn't anticipate that we would have an application like this again until perhaps we're finishing up the 50-year plan and we're looking at a potential UGB expansion or something like that. That would be the next time something of this magnitude would likely come up. So it's not to say that it should happen all that often. It's not that often we have a consolidated application where we get 7 applications consolidated into one decision. That's why this was so large. But I will think about your question and I will see if there is any potential way to give you more time with the material. Again, I don't
but you're
anticipate.
obligated by a state
Yes.
regulation.
The
so-
city and.
Yeah.
I mean,
Like, I would love that.
I,
here's
I'm,
the 20
I'm
here's the 120
executive.
day person.
I'm going first.
And this is, we are still in the meeting. I just
Yes.
want to.
I just wanted to comment, because I was in your role, for many years. And so I understand that because I felt like it was challenging. We get the packets on Thursday and, or I'm sorry, the week prior and have a short kind of a week to review and be prepared to have something intelligent to say and get things on the record. So what I would recommend is that you sort of, I know you're not that familiar with looking at engineering plans and reading through all the land use stuff, but what I would do is look at things where I knew there might be, points of where there might be issues. Obviously, you're not going to focus on the landscape plan, right? Because it's not a critical issue. But you might focus on the flooding or those sensitive lands types, portions of it, and then kind of go from there and see how much time you have to look at the more common elements. But I would always focus on the most critical pieces to me that would cause the plan to have to change. And so that's, obviously the flooding, which everybody was focused on.
And that's exactly, I mean, I'm not an expert on flooding, but I've seen it flood.
Yeah.
Okay.
So again, we would
And it's not
probably want to
based on
keep
a
our
few min-
comments
few
not
minutes up or
focused.
down.
Yeah.
So
And then,
I guess I would like more time to be able.
Mhm.
well, and you certainly have, Lori and I can also help you with, understanding it in more in layman's terms. So if you want to schedule a time to meet with us,
Absolutely.
we're available to do that. This week was really tough just because of this project being so
Redeeming
time-consuming.
feature was that got extended.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, in future applications, feel free to call Lori and schedule time to sit with us and talk through stuff.
Yeah,
We're
absolutely.
more than happy to do that. We can't do 4 of you at the same time, but
Right.
certainly one of you at a
I
time.
think you could do, as long as it's not a quorum,
Yeah.
you can.
Yeah.
So you could do 2 or 3 at a time.
So to talk through technical stuff.
It extend, but no, and that was only.
No, this meeting, you're concluded with
No, I'm
this.
just saying, there-
Commissioner, we can't hear you.
Forward, that we're gonna extend it to the next meeting.
I think Scott can address
Yeah.
that.
So a couple of points on the timeline thing. With residential, it's hard because of that 120-day deadline.
You have to
That's-
fall in it too.
Yeah, that's from, once the application is complete to the time that all of the appeals through the city process have been completed, and that all has to occur in 120 days.
And our meetings fit into that.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
That's my question.
Oh, okay.
not-
Oh, yeah, yeah.
I believe
absolutely.
non-residential has a longer timeline.
No,
It's all down to 120 now?
Everything,
everything.
every type of land use.
Wow.
In the county, I believe they have additional time. In
Oh,
the city, they do
that's
not.
where-
I think it's 150 days.
Yeah, 150, that's what I was thinking.
Right.
But it's tough to meet the timeline,
Correct.
but, this is trying to be fair to everybody.
So to make sure that that we can do due diligence.
Yeah.
That's all.
and-
Understood.
I know for me, my situation, I felt that it was a really tough one to make a decision on, but I kept thinking and putting myself in the shoes, and I think everybody here did the same thing. Myself in their shoes, if I had land and I saw water all the time and I was going to have more cars going up and down the road. So I looked for all the things.
Yeah, we shouldn't discuss outside of the,
No, no, what I'm saying-
I'm just talking about the timing.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, well, that's what I was getting at, is it saves me some time because I started looking for the things that were going to help them. If I couldn't find that, then my decisions such,
right,
I had to go with what I had to go with.
right.
And to your one other comment you made, Bruce,
Mhm.
we can continue any hearing.
But it
It's a-
has to stay in the,
And within that, and I'll say it's really bad form, at least, if we continue a meeting that there's not a reason to do so.
Right.
that's why I was saying it was based on
Yeah.
the clock.
Mhm.
So, any commissioner comments not at all related to what we've already said?
Nope.
Yeah, I'll say it just like, said a couple of times, but I think everybody did their due diligence and, the
Like to
applicant-
say thanks to the staff for all their hard
yeah,
work.
the staff, the public, like,
Mhm.
they did a lot of work on this and, they were, it wasn't, they were making they were asking reasonable questions.
Mhm.
So, and then, the applicant worked with us and I think the commissioners, we did a good job. That's all I got. No more commissioner comments. Staff, want to take a pass?
I will say very briefly, because you have been here late, that you did an excellent job tonight. It was perfect. And so we kept a clean record. Monica was able to put some very clear points in the record as well, where she agreed, as did several others of you. And so I really appreciate it because this is a tough application. And for a lot of you, it's maybe the first contentious application, but I would say that you did exceptionally well tonight. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Chris?
I just reiterate what Lori said. You guys did a great job procedurally and asking some very good questions. And Monica, thank you, and the others for, getting some things on the record. It's always good to just acknowledge some common points of discussion, provide a summary of those for the record within the Planning Commission. And so, yeah, we appreciate all your effort and we understand how difficult it is. And Lori and I try to anticipate, our process in preparing these. Lori does all the heavy lifting, obviously, but, we both try to anticipate those points where, think of it in the same way that you would and try to get ahead of that in the findings and in the recommendations. And so, and in pushing back on the developers, because we've been doing this for long enough that we know where people's, at least we think where people's concerns are. So where we have the ability to do that, we do that.
I would say too, just quickly, I think it's going to give council a better ability to come to a decision because your vote was unanimous. And when they see the meeting minutes, they'll be able to follow your train of thought and how you perceive the application to meet all the criteria. So again, great job.
All right. And with that, hey, it's 8:53 and we are adjourned.
Thank you.